Hi everyone, Stjepan here. Today I'm going to show you a very interesting game I played against the Dutch defense, in which I'd missed two very important patterns which you should know. I did manage to play well towards the end of the game, but I should have won the game easily. And this is going to be very interesting tactically, especially if you play d4 or if you play the Dutch. Okay, so I'm facing an opponent rated 1700. I played d4, he played f5, which I'd actually expected. He plays it in most of his games, and I actually had a lot of information about him online. I didn't have much time to prepare because round 2 was at 9:30 in the morning on the second day of the tournament, and the first round finished at like 11 p.m. So I basically just wanted to go to sleep. Okay, I played bishop f4 here, and here knight f6 is the only move ever played. I've never faced any other move, I've never seen any other move. My opponent played pawn to g6, and now I had a vague idea of how to exploit this because I thought it was a mistake because I've never seen it before, but I didn't go for it. And when I was analyzing the game, I just couldn't find the defense to what I was intending to do and what the correct idea here is. And I ended up playing e3. The correct idea, and this is the first pattern you should be aware of, is simply to go h4. Now, black doesn't have any better options than to go knight f6, and you simply go h5. The rook is hanging. If this is taken, then you simply go e3, and eventually this king is going to be extremely unsafe. You're threatening to take on h5 already, and the position becomes unbearable. So punishing g6 is simple enough. Just play h4, h5. There really is no decent defense to that, and white should already be much better. After e3, the position is okay. Bishop to g7. Now the rook is defended. Knight f3. My opponent played c5. I went c3, and here he played queen to b6. Which in these structures isn't really a good idea because it undefends the center basically and the black king. So after queen to b3, I thought d5 was impossible. He played d5, and after d5 I had a long think. So basically I can either win the game on the spot or try to win it in like 10 moves. So the way to punish d5, which unfortunately I didn't do, and this is the second pattern which you should be aware of, because this could happen in your games. It's a mistake, but it's a logical mistake. b2 is undefended, d5 is undefended. The correct way to play is to simply take. The pawn on b2 cannot be taken. If this is taken, then simply bishop to c4, and white has a winning position. The engine gives this as +5. The rook cannot be taken. Let's just look at one line. So for example, e6 preventing queen f7, just queen c5. The bishop is hanging, so if queen takes on a1, then you take the bishop on c8. If the queen doesn't take, then you have bishop b5 ideas and stuff like that. Any check on c1 can simply be met with king to e2. There's really no problem there. This rook is irrelevant for the attack. So I didn't do that, unfortunately. After d5, I found something that I thought was safer and better because I couldn't calculate everything, and I didn't want to invest half an hour on move 6, on move 7 after taking on d5, which I should have done. I took on b8, which may seem strange, but it seemed like a very good idea to me. Okay, rook takes b8. And now again, queen takes d5 is strong. It's almost as strong as before, because on queen b2, I go bishop c4, and on e6, I go queen d6, threatening the rook as well. I played bishop to b5 check, and now if bishop to d7, then I can take everything and have a better pawn structure. It's as simple as that. So basically the king has to move. he ended up playing king to f8, which I think is the best move, which I'd expected. And this seemed to me to be a good position, and that's what I went for instead of queen takes d5. I was wrong. Queen takes d5 is simply winning. This position is equal. It doesn't matter that the black king is misplaced, according to the engine. Of course, for humans, that seemed very relevant to me. Okay, now dc5, queen c5. I didn't want to get a complicated position when I can just exploit my small advantage of having a better king. Castles, and here my opponent blundered, luckily for me. If he doesn't blunder, then just simple development is fine. Knight f6 is a normal move. There are basically no big issues in black's position, despite the weaknesses on g5 and on e6 and on f7 and the unsafe king. My opponent played pawn to a6, which just loses a pawn and basically gives white an easy strategy, and that's to advance his queenside pawns and put pressure on the center. So I just took the pawn. Of course, the pawn is pinned to the rook. Okay, e5. He wants to play e4 and then bishop to e5 and queen to d6. I saw all of that. I retreated the bishop first. e4, knight d4, knight e7 played first, knight a3. I want to be able to control these two squares with one of my knights, because his only source of counterplay is pressure on h2. I need to defend h2 in advance by making sure that there cannot be a battery on the diagonal. So one of my knights is coming to b5, therefore the queen can never go to d6 or c7. Okay, bishop e5, knight a b5, and now of course these two moves are impossible. He played bishop to d7. I played a4, just securing everything. Of course, if he takes, I'm going to take with the knight. If he takes on e5 here, I'm going to take with the pawn and open up the c file. He played king f7. And now I need to start opening things up. I need to get some play of my own. I'm a pawn up and everything is defended and everything is fine. But if black is given enough time, then maybe h5, g5, and you know, he could start attacking me. So I played f3 to make sure none of that happens before I get play against his king. This basically has to be taken because this pawn is pinned to the king. So if I'm allowed to take, this pawn is pinned as well. Therefore, I'm threatening to win a pawn with f takes e4. So ef3, bishop f3. Okay, pressure on d5, and this is already a very pleasant position. It should be winning. Of course, there are ways to mess it up, but again, I'm threatening e4 in some positions, and he played rook b to d8. I could go e4 straight away, I think. I don't think there are any major issues with that, but I wanted to play it safe and just centralize my pieces first. Of course, if this is taken, I can just take with the bishop, and that would be check. But I played rook a d1 first, which is a sensible move, nothing wrong with that. He took on b5, and I could take with the queen, which should be the best move. But I didn't want to trade queens because that would give him drawing chances. My c3 pawn is not easy to defend if everything is traded off. I would have to bring my knight back to d4, and then he would challenge the a file, so I just took with the a pawn. And strategically, this should be better than taking with the queen, because his knight is now restricted from the c6 square, meaning that my knight is permanently going to stay on d4, unless he wants to give up this great bishop, which he doesn't want to do. Okay, queen d6, pressure on h2. There's no longer a knight on b5, but that's fine. I can just go h3. And now he wants to get his queen to g3 and then his bishop back to the diagonal, so I needed to be prepared for that, but I have a knight that could go to e2, so that's really no issue. He played bishop f6, preparing queen g3 and bishop e5. I just went c4, opening the position up. Queen g3, knight e2. The queen goes back to e5, and now cd5, finally breaking through. Rook d6, blockading the pawn. The pawn really cannot be taken because I have so much pressure that he's losing a piece. Yeah, I'm sorry, he cannot take it at all. And also I have knight f4 and rook d5 and the other rook coming to d1, so basically it's a free pawn. So rook d6 blockading. And now queen c3, the queen has no squares. I'm forcing a queen trade in a position where I'm 2 pawns up, so what could be wrong with that? Okay, he took. I don't know what else to suggest. Okay, so takes, bc, finally repairing my pawn structure. And this is not simple because he has enough pieces to blockade the position and try to put pressure on my d5 and b5 pawns. But given some good technique and patience, I should be able to convert it without too much trouble. Rook c8, rook to d3, defending everything a million times. Rook c5 puts pressure on the b5 pawn, so rook to b1. I just need to be patient, and once I play c5, the game is over. But I need to prepare it and slowly improve my position, maybe even get my king into play and get my knight into d4 and just play slowly. Knight c8, preparing knight b6, putting pressure on the d5 pawn. Knight d4. And now if this is taken, I would take with the e pawn and then simply go c4, c5. There is no defense to that, so it cannot be taken. She plays rook b6. Now here I could have gone knight b3, and this is actually a line that the engine suggests. I looked at it briefly. If knight b3 here and rook takes b5, then I can play c4. My knight is defended. Once the rook gets to b4, because there are no other squares, I can play c5. Now this rook only has one square, has to go to b5, and now I just go d6, and this is straightforward and simply winning. I'm just going to make a queen. Also, I have bishop to d5, and the position is just great. I couldn't see all of that, so I simply played rook to b4. He went knight d6, and I went king f2, inviting knight e4 check, which he got tempted to play and did play it in the end. And knight e4 is a huge mistake. Seems nice, but it isn't nice. Okay, knight e4, bishop e4, f e4, and now there are two moves. I can play knight e6, which is much stronger. I played rook to d2, but knight e6 would have been simpler. Knight e6 threatening the e4 pawn. If he takes my rook, I take his. So rook c8 is probably the best option, and then I take on e4, and after rook takes b5, I go c4. And again, I've succeeded in pushing my pawns, and from here on, I should be able to make a queen without too much trouble. But I played rook d2. Again, I didn't play precisely this game, unfortunately, but I had a plan and I went with it. Okay, so now he can either take on d5 or on c3. If he takes on c3, this simply isn't good. I go knight e6 and win the e4 pawn. The rook drops back, let's say to c8, and I take on e4. And again, I'm just going to push my pawn. So he took on d5, which is understandable. And finally now I get to play c4, rook c5. Now I'm going to have to invest some more time to play c5, but again, once I play c5, it's over. Rook a4, bishop h4 check, g3, rook f6, king g2. Okay, bishop g5, I have to defend, so rook e2. Rook d6, knight to b3, finally dislodging this rook, rook c7. And they could go c5 straight away, but I went knight d2 first. I want to be able to put pressure on e4 before I play c5. Okay, rook e6, rook to a2, defending everything. I want to get my rook to c2 and then play c5. Therefore b6, which is a good idea. h4, bishop to e7, rook to c2, h5, rook f2 check, bishop f6, and rook f4. And now a simple plan, c5 and then rook c4, and I'm going to have a passed pawn on the b file and a safe king on f3 once I get rid of the e4 pawn. Rook c7, he has to defend, now c5. That has to be taken. So bc5, rook c5, king e8, and now rook c4, and there is no more defense to the e4 pawn. Okay, so bishop e5 played. Rook takes, rook to d6, knight to f3. Yeah, it's just over. Bishop f6, takes, knight to d4. If he trades, it's going to be even easier for me. So rook to d5, rook to b4. He played king d7, trying to stop the pawn, but there is no stopping the pawn, just b6. Bishop to e7, threatening the rook, but I just played b7, and he resigned. If he takes my rook, I make a queen. So yeah, I could have played this way more precisely, but I didn't. Coming back to the start of the game after queen b3, d5. I mean, I should have. Again, this is not an issue of not seeing things. I saw that I could take on d5, but I was lazy to calculate deeply because I didn't want to invest too much time and risk investing too much time if there was nothing in the position. But this is obviously a critical move, and investing half an hour if you're going to win the game in 3 moves is fine. So again, just queen takes d5. And if the pawn cannot be taken, what does he do? Okay, I'm going to turn on the engine to show you the evaluation. Okay, bishop to c4, the engine says +4. e6 is the only move. If he checks me, then king e2, the position is +8, so he cannot check me. If he takes on a1, then I just go queen f7, and here, and castle. And the bishop is hanging, everything is hanging. Let's say he saves the bishop, I go here, I win the rook. This position is +12. So obviously he's either going to lose a ton of material or get mated. So, I mean, I'm not that bad that I couldn't have figured that out had I invested some time. I just didn't invest time. I need to start doing that. And if you remember yesterday's game, no, not yesterday's game, the game against Herreganates, I again did not invest enough time. I played almost instantly in a good attacking position. When you have a good position, when you recognize it as a critical position, don't make the same mistake I did of not investing enough time to figure everything out, because it could pay off just immediately. This position is obviously over. Okay, thank you for watching. See you tomorrow for round 3. So after 2 rounds, I had 1 out of 2, which is okay. Okay, thank you very much. Stay tuned for more chess. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.